Hey, I'm Jennifer Hurvitz, best-selling author of the books One Happy Divorce and Woulda, Coulda, Shoulda. I'm a relationship coach, a public speaker, and I'm the mom of two of the most kick-ass teenage boys around. Raw, authentic, and insightful, this podcast is a no-bullshit slice of reality for anyone curious about what it looks like to get divorced. On Doing Divorce Right, we'll give you the tools you'll need to navigate your relationships, whether you're contemplating divorce or have already signed the papers. We'll figure it out together without taking ourselves too seriously here on Doing Divorce Right podcast. Hey, y'all. You will not believe what I have found out. I found this cool new thing. Well, it's not new. It's been around. But for me, it's pretty new. I just heard about it. Worthy.com. Like an engagement ring after divorce, inherited jewelry sitting in a safety deposit box, or a watch that no longer serves you. Worthy is an online auction house for diamonds, diamond jewelry, luxury watches, or anything else laying around. Sell the jewelry you no longer want or need for more with their full service solution. I mean, does it get better than that? So check it out, you guys. Worthy.com. And let me know what you think. Hey, good morning. It is Tuesday, and it's time for Doing Divorce Right or Avoiding It Altogether. I'm Jennifer Hurvitz, and I'm your host every single Tuesday. So excited to be here. Okay, y'all, I've got a good guest today. You know, I say this every week, of course, that I've got great guests every single week. But this one, you know, it's been a long time since I've had a new guy in the house. Normally, it's my boyfriend here with me, Jim Healy. But today, you know what? Actually, I think it's been like, wait a minute, it's been like over a year since I've had a man in the house today. I can't believe it. But this guy, he's got a new book. I've got Steve Kane here. And I don't know if you guys have read this book yet. It's pretty, I got to tell you, it's pretty awesome. I think I'm going to swear today. And you know, my favorite thing to do, it's called Fuck It, Get a Divorce, a guide for optimists. And you know what? I can't even tell you. I'm going to read his bio and then we're going to bring him out and we're going to talk. And if we're here for longer than half an hour, I really don't care because this is some good shit. I love it. So Steve Kane is a Boston-based author, entrepreneur, investor, and divorce dad of two. Steve is the author of Fuck It, Get a Divorce. I love that. The Guide for Optimists. He is also the founder and CEO of the gethappy.life platform for modern relationships. Steve penned his book and founded Get Happy Life to provide a community and resources for people who find themselves in unhappy relationships and are contemplating a new beginning, which is like what I do, and I love it. And hi, Steve, how are you?
Hello, nice to be here.
Nice. I'm so glad you're finally here.
Thank you, me too.
Okay, cool. So, I mean, where do we even start with this? First of all, tell me a little bit about you. I'm not going to interrupt you. And then tell me, like, how did you decide to, well, clearly, how did you decide to do this book and where did it come from?
Okay. So I am based in Boston, as you said, and I'm mostly in the business of software startups. I've been the co-founder and the CEO of a bunch of software companies. And so I come to the world of, you know, relationship advice or relationship coaching or self-help, whatever we want to call it, quite recently. And that is as a result of my own personal experience of marriage and divorce. And I had, you know, I'm happy to tell people my marriage was one of the, I mean, I hope to live a lot longer, but as of today, it's certainly one of the highlights of my life. And it was something that was really wonderful and produced a couple of wonderful children. But the conclusion of that marriage and the divorce was something that was, in retrospect, and I'm not saying anything that my ex wouldn't agree with and that she hasn't discussed with me or said herself, but the end of it was painful and unnecessarily so. And so, you know, I started to gather my thoughts on this subject, and some friends who were helping me think these things through, and talking to a lot of people as I was going through this process of an unpleasant end of a marriage. You know, I got a lot of encouragement from people, and maybe you should write a blog or a blog post. And the blog post ended up being about 250 pages long and available in paperback.
That's so funny. That's how I started too with a blog. But what I think is really interesting is there are very few men who, first of all, I'm just going to say it, who have the balls to do this. So I give you kudos, first of all.
Thank you.
Second of all, there are very few men that give the perspective and that have books out there. So this is really great because I feel like it's so supportive for the male community to be able to pick up a book like this, females too, but females to get the male perspective, and for males just to have somewhere to go to read a book about divorce, because it's tough and it's shitty and it sucks. And I think the levity that you bring with your book, it's really funny. It's good. It's got some good shit.
Thank you. I hope so. I'm glad to hear that.
It's great. Yeah, I love it. And I thought it was, I mean, I can start at the beginning, but go. So I don't want to interrupt you. So basically, so you wrote the book, you decided to do it and keep going. So what did you decide? You just said, one day I'm going to just write. It takes a long time to write a book. So,
Yeah, no, I worked on it for quite some time. I got divorced about 5 years ago. And,
okay.
I would say I really wanted to communicate. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that I cover in the book but you could kind of boil it down, if you will, to two big bullet points or two main messages. Number one is, congratulations to us all. We all live in the modern world. And in the modern world, we're almost certainly, barring some act of God or some unfortunate thing, we're all going to live to be 80 or 90 or 100. Even better, we're going to, right up until the end, be active intellectually, physically, sexually, emotionally. And so if we end up in an unhappy relationship, no matter how old you are, whether you're 30 or whether you're 60 or whatever age you are, well, holy smokes. I mean, that is a very long prison sentence if you decide that you're just going to stay in it because you're in it already. That's decades, if not longer, of unhappiness. But in the modern world, again, happily for us, luckily for us, we don't have to. We live in a world of legal divorce. We live in a world, almost all of us, of no-fault divorce. We live in a world where divorce is common. We live in a world where our children of any age are already exposed to divorce, whether we realize it or not, in the sense that if roughly 1 in 2 marriages fail, then a lot of our kids' friends are living in homes that don't have, kind of a leave it to beaver nuclear family. So that's message number one. Congratulations, you live in the modern world. And you don't have to do these things if you don't want to. Mm-hmm. And number two is that despite what you may feel or think or see in the popular culture or in the media or what have you, divorce does not have to be a war, almost never should be a war. There's nothing to gain by going to war. And so divorce, it's never going to be sweet and easy. It's not going to be fun. It's a big, challenging, complicated, emotional, knot that needs to be untied. No pun intended, or pun intended.
Yeah, that was good. I like it. I may still ask you.
But it's going to, it can and should be peaceful, amicable, heaven forbid, maybe even loving in a certain way. And because you're not breaking up a family, you're reorganizing a family. And why do you want to, do that through antagonism or war or vitriol or any of these harsh things? You don't. You don't. It's not good for you. It's not good for what you're trying to create, which is the new chapter of your life. It's not good for your children, if there are children. And if you can, kind of gather your wits together and gather your emotions together and be a little bit thoughtful and prepared, then there are huge benefits to not letting a breakup or a divorce become a war. It's the upsides are huge, the downsides are huge, so therefore choose the upsides and don't go to war. So those are my two premises.
I like your number two much better. I'll be honest with them than your number one. Obviously, I wrote a book called Woulda, Coulda, Shoulda, The Divorce Coach's Guide to Staying Married. And my first book is One Happy Divorce. And my podcast is Doing Divorce Right. So I totally believe in that you can do a divorce right. And that I am one of the lucky ones who had a healthy, amicable, my divorce. I don't want to say it was easy. My ex-husband and I are best friends. So it's nice to have you here because I also have to be aware of the fact that most divorces are not like mine. Right. So I have to have guests on all the time who can speak to the masses who do not have the divorce that I have. Right. So
and I would, if I could, I would add one other, kind of comment, which is when I say, that my point is, oh, congratulations to us all. We live in the modern world, fuck it, get a divorce. That is not to say to give up easily on your marriage.
Yes,
and that is not to say that, oh, some people have marriages that are happy and effortless.
Right.
What's wrong with you? No. It's nothing like that. Marriage only really can succeed in the long term if both parties agree to agree frequently and to figure out a dispute resolution framework, and more importantly, to just wake up every day and say, I have to reinvent myself in my relationship today. because it's different. I'm different. I'm growing. My partner's growing. Circumstances change, and it's a constant process of reinvention and investment in the relationship.
Right.
If you get to the point where it's not, where even that is not making you feel fulfilled or happy,
then you have to get
that's when I kick in.
Right. It's so funny because I tell everyone, relationships are work. Everything is work. A divorce is work, and a marriage is work, and it's everything is work, right? So pick it. Are you going to work on your marriage, or are you going to work on your divorce? Right. So it's very interesting because we have exactly.
That's a good way to put it. I like that.
Yeah. And it's funny.
I'm going to borrow that from you.
Oh, you can. No problem. It's funny. We both have the same exact feelings, only we flipped it. So I'm telling people, like, if you're in it's never stay in an abusive, physically, emotionally abusive marriage, get out, but do the work while you're there. And it's so funny that we click. It's very interesting to me.
Yeah.
But I also like how in your book, you really spell out, which I didn't do in my book. You spell out like what, as far as like what litigation is, what mediation is. I liked that, how you really told people.
Yeah, thank you. I was, without knowing I was prepared for a lot of these things. I was prepared for a lot of these things just because I do come from like the entrepreneurial world and the business world. And, so for example, having to work with an attorney is not a daunting prospect for me.
For some of us, it is.
Times.
Right.
Oh, most people.
Yeah, right. I didn't know. I had no clue.
Right. And so I was kind of taken aback to discover, as I was, kind of talking with my network of friends and colleagues and support people, as I was going through it, how little people knew about the kind of the pragmatic side of and it was really stunning. It still is stunning to me because I mean, we all get married for emotional reasons.
Oh, so true.
And yet marriage is a legal contract.
Right.
And some of us just don't really ever consider that until then. Unfortunately, a lot of us, kind of wake up one day with a feeling of intense dread and drenched in sweat because now they do have to deal with it and they feel completely overwhelmed and unprepared. So that was another, thing I tried to get done in the book is like, look, here's what you need, maybe not what you need to know. You'll have to figure that out on your own, but here's at least some of the questions you need to ask and some of the issues you'll need to wrestle with.
Yeah. I mean, I just think, that was totally me. I mean, I knew that I was, my ex and I knew we were getting a divorce, but I didn't realize until, I was going through the process, what exactly it was going to entail. So that's, in my book, I was like, look, you need to know the grass is not greener and I'm going to lay it out for you. Right. And I think you did a really good job of that.
Thank you.
You know what I'm saying? I think that people don't realize until they actually go through it, what you're going to have to actually go through. Right. So, and when I was going through it, like people would say, oh, it's going to be bad. It's going to be this, it's going to be, but I didn't believe it because you have to go through it. Right. You just have to. And it's just awful. It's freaking awful. And you're right. It's better than staying in an unhealthy or, you can get out and there is life on the other side. And another thing I loved about your book, if you don't mind me saying, I loved how at the end you did like all the music and the soundtracks. And
thank you. Yeah. I love that stuff. Yeah. I'm very, That
was cool. I liked it. And the pictures and you just did a really good job. It was really good.
Like I said, I think that there's we're at this very interesting moment in time, perhaps, where, the end of a marriage or a long-term relationship, there's obviously very complicated emotions and sadness and all this stuff, of course.
Right.
But the fact that we are living in a world where we can reinvent ourselves and have new chapters and conclude things, even complicated, deeply felt things like a marriage, conclude them in a satisfying and amicable way. I mean, it's almost cause for celebration, I think. If we look at like the generations that came before us, they just had to submit themselves to extreme duress and, lifelong kind of carrying around, guilt and in some cases, being stigmatized. And we don't live in that world anymore. In the same way, like imagine like how, a generation or two ago, people who got fired from a job, like we're just like it was like the Scarlet Letter or something.
It's like,
And no one's proud of being fired from a job today, and no one seeks to be fired from a job, and no one, necessarily goes around bragging about being fired from a job. But when you meet somebody that's been fired from a job, you don't immediately put them into the category of like, I can't hang out with this person. This is a tarnished, dented, irredeemable person. And it's really the same thing with divorce. And we all know it, and we just don't know we know it. So we all have friends who are divorced. We don't like judge them poorly.
no, I did lose friends though. Did you lose friends? How were your, I definitely, I have friends here that were completely thought it was contagious. 100% contagious.
Yep. No, that's a real thing.
That shocked me.
To me.
That shocked me.
And I like the way you put that too, which is they thought it was contagious.
They did, 100%. Right? I had friends that told me their husbands, I'm not kidding you, wouldn't let them go out with me. It was so bizarre. And that was one of the things that I wrote about that was so shocking. And also my kids' relationships changed, which really blew my mind.
I'm happy to say, to my knowledge, my kids' relationships.
How old are your kids? They
are now 18 and 21.
Okay, so they're older. They're older. Mine were 9 and 11, so we still did things with other families. So then all of a sudden, my kids lost their it was like they weren't invited to the family stuff anymore, even though Mark and I were, my husband and I were still really close. I would say, well, you can still invite Jonah. Why can't he come on the ski trail?
I'm so sorry to hear that. And I don't know these people, so you'll allow me to say shame on those people.
Right. And I speak about it too. But here's the thing. I can't blame them, because here's why. People, it's just like a death, right? People don't know what to say or do. So in divorce, it does mask a death, right? It's like you go through the same grieving process. You do. And I call people out too. I really do feel like, I don't know if you felt this way, but I think that any divorcee or any person that goes through a divorce that doesn't feel some guilt if they have children, I think they're lying. I mean, I will always have guilt. I will always feel guilt. I have no regret. It's different than guilt. I don't regret getting divorced because I don't want to be with my husband, but I do regret. I do feel guilty that I did that to my kids, even though sure, they're resilient and they'll be fine and blah, blah, blah. I just do feel, I always feel guilty. I mean, it's just the way that
I'm with you on that. And
I think it's a mom thing, maybe more of a mom thing. Do you think, or no?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, good.
But I will say that, and I'm not saying this is a good thing, and I'm not saying it's an appropriate thing. I'm just saying it's a thing. Which is that a lot of guys, I think, at least in my experience, at some superficial but important level, have the ability, and maybe it's a reflex or whatever, but to kind of go into almost an autopilot mode and view things as, I guess transactional maybe is the word I might use.
I agree with you, like a business transaction.
Right.
Totally. Absolutely.
Right. So I certainly think that at some point, when divorce is put on the table, that a lot of guys, maybe even most guys, go into transactional mode.
Oh my God, I think that's so good. I think you're so right.
Right. But that's separate from how they might feel about their kids.
I agree. The kids are different.
I've never yet met a guy who, is just kind of cool or indifferent to
which is why,
the sadness that children feel in these things, because they do. Mom and dad are breaking up. My world is getting turned upside down. That is not a happy event for them.
Right. And that's why when I talk about high conflict divorces and co-parenting, which is why I always say to my clients, make sure when you are doing exchanges with your ex, if they are in high conflict situations, that you always use the children's names.
An excellent idea. Someone else gave me a super idea, which I think I put in the book, which is that when you're setting up your new place, or when you're setting up the old place in the absence of your departing spouse, make sure you still have pictures of that person.
Oh, yeah.
Around.
Yeah, for sure. We do that too in my house. My kids have a picture of my husband next to their bed and in their rooms.
Right.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Right. I mean, it doesn't have to be, I always tell people, put your egos aside, and it has to be about your kids. And this is my big thing too. And I say, when you're married, you have to put your kids second, And when you're divorced, you have to put your kids first. And
Excellent. Right.
that's it. Like it's the name of the game, and you got to do it. And I didn't do that in my marriage. I did not put my relationship first. I didn't. And I think that's why I'm one of the reasons I'm divorced. So
interesting.
yeah.
But
what
let me,
shoulda.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I would like to just, for the listeners, just, point out something that I spend a good amount of time in my book on, though, which is that even though I would submit, I'm not a social scientist, but I will submit that in 100% of the cases, children are unhappy when their parents break up. Now, if you're sitting and watching your parents throwing pottery at each other or having fist fights or there's substance abuse, I kind of carve that out. That's a whole other world that I'm not talking about right now. But in the vast majority of cases, the kids are unhappy that mom and dad are breaking up and that now we're going to 2 households and now 1 and all that stuff. However, there is a lot of research. Social scientists have been studying divorce for many decades now, and the data is quite clear. And the data says that children of divorce have roughly the same life expectations and experiences and outcomes as children of marriage, meaning that the fact that you are a child who grew up in a household with divorce, divorced parents, doesn't mean you have any different destiny than another kid who grew up in a household that stayed married. You're going to have the same rates of depression and happiness, success and failure, healthy relationships and unhealthy relationships.
I'm not so sure about this, Steve. I am trying to bite my tongue, but there's been a lot of, I don't know, but everyone, there's so much data out there, but I think that, and I don't want to, but I think there's also data that says otherwise, that's why data is data. And I think that's why.
Well, the big caveat, Jennifer, and maybe you and I are actually on the same page, but we don't know it yet.
Yeah.
The big caveat is that if during the process of the divorce, the parents fight with each other and go to war.
Gotcha. Okay.
Then it's almost 100% the opposite outcome. That the kids have a very predictable,
I see,
and very lingering negative consequence.
I see. Yeah, because there's some major research saying that the opposite actually, and also what else affects it is the sleep, which is so strange. I just learned this in my classes last weekend that I took.
Say more.
Sleep. That they need, that the amount of sleep they have is so indicative of their process of their
as a separate matter from marriage and divorce, or
no, with marriage and divorce, meaning that if during the divorce, the kids that slept more efficiently in the houses where they were co-parenting houses that had the same sleep patterns and the same sleep, like the hours that they got more sleep, they were more that the stats were higher.
That's an interesting one.
I never knew that before. I thought it was so interesting to me. I was like, oh my God, because I'm like such a sleep crazy person, but because it's hard when the kids go back and forth. They have different rules, and mom lets them stay up later, and the dad lets them whatever. But the consistency and the patterns of sleep, which I thought was very interesting to me. Right?
When you put it that way, it easily passes the common sense test. Absolutely.
Right? Doesn't it? I mean, they're tired. The little guys are, and you know what? So much happens when they're sleeping. Their growth hormones are, released. And I just think wow, that's like such a wow moment for me. And
Right. No, that actually ties in also, a little bit off topic, but a lot of high schools are rethinking their days.
Yeah. Starting later. Right.
Right.
Totally.
Exactly.
Totally. Exactly. Yeah. And how are your kids doing now? As you're kind of adultish, so they're doing okay.
Again, I'm gonna caveat that like any other parent of any teenager, there's so much
Me too.
No, but I think they're doing great.
I think so too. Mine too.
Their mom and I, even though the divorce was unpleasant, that receded very, very quickly. And
good for y'all.
I try to encourage people to, in the moment where you're maybe feeling, raw or angry, this person that you're feeling raw and angry about, this person that you're divorcing and that you're likely to be happy to be divorcing and all these things. Well, that's the same person who you were happy to say I do to.
Yeah, I say that too. I said the same. We're on the same page about so much, Steve. I love this.
Right. And just remember that, because once you're done with the divorce, all the angry, ugly stuff, it's not just going to disappear from your mind, but it's going to recede. And you're really going to remember the good things as well as the bad things, maybe a lot more than the bad things. And particularly if there are children, what good is it to anybody to be in some kind of a feud with this person who, let us remember, you were excited to be the parent of your child.
Isn't that
right?
crazy? Isn't that crazy that you think like that one time you loved that person, right?
Right.
So just like respect them the way that you respected them when you were raising the kids. And then the thing is too, you have to know that person for the rest of your children's lives, right?
Right.
So
Which is
like
almost certainly the rest of your life.
your life, right? Exactly. And you
Right.
hope so. And it's just
Right.
so it's just boggling, just boggles my mind how many people I see that are so angry and bitter still years later. And
I
so
don't understand that, but I
resentful.
certainly have experienced it and know,
Yep.
I don't experience it personally, but I certainly
Yeah.
know
Me too.
people who cannot, it's almost like they fall in love with the feud.
Yeah, is that what it is? I think that's, I hate to say this word, but I don't even throw it out there but like, it's like that narcissistic kind of like,
A
they
little bit.
love, you know?
Yeah. There's also this, whatever. Now you and I are going to, go way, above my pay grade anyway, but I'll go there anyway. There's this well-known phenomenon called the Stockholm
Oh,
syndrome.
yes. Yes. I love, yeah, we're so good. This could go on for hours. Okay. Yeah. I
Right.
know.
So
Right.
there's a certain, like, you fell in love with like the thing that you thought was
Yes.
like your jailer
Yeah.
or
Yeah. It's awful.
yeah.
Yep. I know.
I respect that. I try to help people who are feeling that. I have to say, on some basic level, I don't understand it, simply because the one thing we all know for sure is that we are all heading for the graveyard. And how much of your life do you want to spend obsessing about that feud exactly? Like,
Right.
really, you got nothing else to think about? Like, I can recommend some books to read to like take your mind off it, or like go, I don't know, to whatever.
Yeah.
Go
Exercise. Go find something to
go
do.
enjoy your life. It's not
Right.
going to last
Right.
forever. And can I, if you, I would like to, as while we're on this, still kind of
Please.
tailing
Please.
out on the subject of, kids and everything, slightly on a lighter note. One of the other interesting phenomenon that I discovered personally, and that I, kind of discovered anecdotally, but on a very wide scale, like almost everyone I meet, kind of, looks around furtively, like they don't want to own up to it, but then owns up to it, which is that, as long as like you at least trust your co-parent, your former spouse,
Yeah.
and totally if you like them, but certainly if you just basically trust them, like you're kind of you experience mixed emotions when you're dropping the kids off to be with them.
Yeah.
Right. The mixed emotion is, oh, I'm so sad, I want to see my kids. But the mixed part is, I'm so excited, I get all this time to myself again.
All right. A babysitter. Yay.
Right. Like, oh my God, I'm an empty nester and my kids are only, 8 and 12 years old. Oh my God, this is fantastic.
Right. Yeah. It's almost like you feel guilty that you're happy. Right.
And then there's some guilt in that.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
me too. I'm really guilty. It must be because I'm a cashew. I'm half Catholic and half Jewish, so I get guilt from all sides. That must be
Oh,
it.
wow. Yeah, you get it coming and going.
Yeah,
Wow.
exactly.
Wow. Yeah.
But you're right. I think, and the other thing too is like, I feel like sometimes I feel badly because I didn't choose that. Right. So then it's like, it's not my choice that I get to be alone every week. But at the same time, like you're right, I get to be alone every week. Right. So
Right.
it's very interesting. The whole thing.
Another interesting comment that I was very fortunate that the attorney who represented me in the divorce actually, had some really interesting, thoughtful things to tell me about his experience.
Oh, that's cool.
Of seeing people in divorce. Like, it wasn't so much about like the law and finances, and we covered all that. But every once in a while, he offered something, and that was really interesting, that only somebody who has actually seen a lot of divorce might be able to appreciate or know or intuit. But it was one of those. I think I was kind of feeling a little, sad or whatever. Oh, I'm not going to see my kids as much as I could if I had stayed married or something. And he said, all children, whether married parents or divorced parents, all children, as they grow up, an important part of growing up is developing a unique and solo relationship with their parents. In other words, like when the kids are little, they think of their parents as this unit, the parents, my parents. And then as they get older, they start to see, no, mom is a unique person and dad is a unique person. Oh, and then they further discover, that mom and dad not only are not just amorphous blob of a unit called my parents, they're two discrete people, mom and dad or whatever, that, oh my God, they're human beings and they have flaws and they make mistakes and they have regrets and and goodness gracious, they're just people too. And what my attorney said to me is, children of divorce just start that process a little sooner.
Well, that's very interesting. And I really kind of like that.
Yeah.
I kind of
That
like
was
that.
a great solace to me.
Yeah, that
in
is a great story.
particular moment. And I've 100%, you asked me how my kid's doing, I've 100% seen that to be true.
You know what? I'm kind of noticing that's to be true with mine too.
Right.
And I kind of like it. You know what else is kind of cool for me is that I was a stay-at-home mom, right? So I got divorced and I was like, what the fuck am I going to do? But
Right.
I totally made a career out of my divorce. So I would not be where I am right now had I
Right.
not gotten divorced, which is kind of
Right.
like, sometimes I pinch myself and I'm like, holy crap, like what did I do? Right. So,
Right.
I mean, 2 books later, a podcast and a TV show. I mean, like I can't even imagine. And my kids look at me now with such a different level of respect.
That's
Um,
fabulous.
you know what I'm saying? Like, so
Yeah.
where do you,
Yeah.
I mean, I just, granted, like, did I have to get divorced for this to happen? I did. So,
Right.
it's like, you've got to take lemons and make flipping lemonade because what else are you going to do? Right. So,
Absolutely. I just think that's, back to like, my comment that like my life as an entrepreneur in some ways prepared me for this.
yeah.
Because making lemons out of lemonade, that is kind of the number one job description for an entrepreneur, right? Which is,
So true. So
you
I could
are
use you,
absolutely
actually.
going to get hit in the face with a brick. What do you do after you get hit in the face with
Oh,
a brick?
that's interesting.
Is
Right.
the thing
Right.
that determines your fate.
Yeah. And I made mistakes, right? I mean, you as an entrepreneur, you know this, but like I've made tons of mistakes and it's like 4 years later, I'm just trying to like finally figuring out, oops, maybe I shouldn't have done that. But it's like, I think that's just life, right? You just pick
Yes.
yourself up and my kids are watching me and my grit. I never had grit before. And now
Right.
since I've gotten divorced, I have grit like I've never seen. So
Right. That's great.
yeah. So you know what? Like, I just think you just got to do it, right? Just got to do it. So
Well, that's again, circling back to like the premise in my book, like which, I mean, it's okay to fail, right?
yeah.
It's like an interesting thing. Like in Silicon Valley, there's like endless discussion about is it okay to fail? And the
Yes.
overwhelming answer in Silicon Valley is yes.
Yes.
Not only is it okay to fail, it's necessary to fail.
Yeah. That's how you learn.
Right. That's how you learn. And
Yeah.
that's how you, kind of discover new things about yourself by taking risks. And some of those risks pay off and some don't.
Yeah.
And I think, I hope that people like the work you do, my book, whatever, that we can, reach a few people and at least relieve them of this, feeling like that there's some horrible stigma attached to having a marriage that didn't last forever.
Right. I think that's, well, you just reached a whole lot of people, Steve.
Yeah.
You just did.
I don't even like saying the marriages failed because marriages don't fail. I like to say some marriages last forever and some don't.
Right. You're so right. Because some of them are actually not doing well and they're still lasting, but they're just, for what? So.
For people who either want that or who haven't listened to your podcast or read my book.
Yeah, exactly. Right. You're right. And your book is, so once again, I've got to tell everyone it's called, can I say, you're telling people it's called Fuck It, right?
Absolutely.
Fuck It, Get a Divorce, The Guide for Optimists by Steve Kane. Y'all have got to get this book. It's really great, Steve. It really is. And
one additional note for people,
please.
if you have an interest in the book and you think to yourself, oh my goodness, I'm kind of curious about this book, but I can't have a book called Fuck It, Get a Divorce. I can't leave that on my nightstand. I can't leave that on my cubicle. I offer it also in what I call the incognito.
Oh.
Which has a different cover. And that cover is a book called Everyday Gardening and Meditation. And it does not have anything about marriage, divorce, relationships at all on the cover. The cover looks very much like a book about meditation and gardening.
Does it really? Are you lying? I can't tell if you're telling the truth.
Absolutely, I am telling the truth.
Come on. For real?
100%.
Oh my God, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So, and in fact, on my website, I have a panic button that if you're looking at my website and somebody comes walking along, you click the panic button.
I saw.
And yeah,
awesome.
Yep. So
I should do that too. My first book is One Happy Divorce. Hold the bullshit. And my editor was like, no, Jen, we can't do that. I'm like, look, you put that on there right now. And she's like, oh no, we can't. I'm like, you know what?
You're a pioneer, Jennifer.
That's it. You know what?
I was actually included. I forget Mashable or somebody did a roundup like that. Relationship and self-help books that have, profanity in the title.
Yeah,
It's
there's
become like a
lots.
subgenre. There's a lot of us.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of us. And, I went to Barnes and Noble and I there's a whole book of a whole table filled with books that swear. And my
Yeah.
editor was freaking out. I'm like, because we're in Charlotte, right? So it's like the Bible Belt. And she was
Yeah.
like, Jennifer, we can't do it. I'm like, look, there's 3,000 of us. Now stop it. Put that on there, But
That's
then it's
terrible.
funny because when I went in the Today, Charlotte Today or some TV show, they made me cover it with my thumb. Did they make that on TV? Did you have to cover it?
TV, the FCC, they may have certain, kind of
Yeah.
rules and restrictions that they simply have to pay attention to.
Yeah. I was like, oh, come on, you guys. This is just plain silly. Plain silly.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
God, Steve, this is fun. This is so fun. You can come back anytime. But
Oh,
where
you're
can
so
people,
sweet. Thank you.
anytime, where can people find the book? All over the place, right?
Yeah, you can. But the simplest thing, if people are interested, I have a website. It's gethappy.life. Just type in gethappy.life.
Oh, that's so cool. How'd you
There's a
do
whole
that?
bunch of domains that were activated in the last couple of years. So
Oh, that's cool.
yeah, there's a million of them, but .life is one. So it's get happy, one word, .life, and everything about the book, including the incognito edition there. And
Oh, that's really
if
cool.
anybody has any interest in me on social media, please find me there. And
Cool. And everybody can follow me on Instagram and everywhere else and Facebook and the whole deal, right?
yes, please.
Awesome. Well, Steve, thank you for coming here today and being on my show. And I appreciate you. And I love your book. And come back anytime. And everybody, go get this book. Fuck it, get a divorce. The Guide for Optimists by Steve Kane. And Steve, thanks for coming. And everybody else, you know where to find me. Here every Tuesday hanging out. And then you can find me everywhere else at Jennifer Hurvitz Biz, all over Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and whatever you want to do. And of course, if you want to get a Peace, Love, Truth hat and give 10% back to the Isabella Sanchez Foundation here in Charlotte to fight for kids' cancer, that would be awesome too. Hi, y'all. This has been awesome and fun. And, just thanks for hanging out with me. That is all, folks. See you next Tuesday right here. Peace, love, and truth. Thanks for listening to Doing Divorce Right. If you enjoy the podcast, please subscribe, recommend, rate, and review on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. Want to keep the podcast going? Support us by going to www.jenniferhurvitz.com. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week. Peace, love, and truth.